Here we go. Week 0. And 1, 2, 3. And Worm Trophy Kids presented by Bad News Media. It is the return of the football show, college football show. So you know what that means. Our good friend and co-host Dante is back on the line with us. How are we doing today, good sir?
I am doing well. I'm happy to be back. Happy that it's week 0. Happy to talk college football. And then, as the season goes on, I'll be here to talk college basketball too.
Yes. And we've got a lot of moving parts just in college in general. Like the landscape since the last time we signed off has changed dramatically. So we got a lot to talk about. I think we'll probably start there for the listeners. And then what I'll do is I'll put some timestamps in there. We're going to go through every conference. Some we'll do a little bit more deep dives into, like the Pac-12, because I love the Pac-12. Dante's going to give us some good stuff on the Big Ten. Some of them will probably be a little looser, but we'll put some timestamps out there to kind of let you know where the conference breakdowns are. But the college football landscape has changed dramatically. And I think the biggest part is that the Pac-12 just is no longer going to exist after this year.
Yeah. Sad times for the Pac-12. But, arrogance and hubris gets your conference dissolved.
Where are you at in conference realignment and kind of like what the landscape of college football is looking like here?
I love it. I know I'm in the minority, but I love it because it is just pure and utter chaos. It makes no sense. College football is going to be just this. It's going to be unrecognizable. And I know a lot of old heads and traditionalists are just like, no, bring me back my regions, bring me back my original conferences. But the moment we let TV deals control college football, that's the moment you sold college football sold. So I don't care what you cared about the BCS. I don't really care what you care about the playoff. This conference realignment is going to probably keep happening for the next 4 or 5 years before we tamper everything down. I'm in favor of just letting the networks at this point decide what conferences are. Let the networks pull a bunch of money and then they decide what the conferences are, because I feel like that's where we're going.
That's essentially what they're doing right now. I feel like I have a take that is similar to my streaming take in that this is all going to go, for the next couple years, and then somewhere down the road, we're going to be like, wait, what if we did this regionally and we broke them up and we created these conferences that were regional focused? We're just going to go back. Same way with streaming where one day people are going to be like, wait, why don't we just bundle all these apps together and sell it for one price and just reinvent cable? Because it's either that or college football breaks off on its own, because I don't see how it's a sustainable market. And this has been talked about a lot on some schools. For schools like USC's swimming team to be traveling to Rutgers and then traveling all the way back. And because a lot of these non-football sports, we know this with basketball, play multiple games a week, and travel is just going to be insane. So I feel like we're either headed towards two paths. The networks, like you said, but they just break off college football all on its own, and they do their own thing. And then we go back to these conferences for all non-football.
Right. Or
we have these mega conferences that last for a while, and then they create divisions within the mega conferences that essentially just look like the old ACC, Pac-12, Big Ten, and they are broken off more regionally.
Yeah, I think so. We talked a while ago about, does college ever go to the point where it is the Spartans sponsored by Michigan State University, right? Or it's
which is what the national championship is now. It's the national championship basically presented by the NCAA. It's not, or not. It's basically sponsored by the NCAA. It's its own entity at this point.
It's its own entity, and I think instead of us being 10 to 15 years away from that, I think we're 4 or 5 years away from that. Because I agree, and I think everybody sees it right in the wall. College football is too bloated, and it matching up with the university, the academics of the university, just they don't mesh. This is more and more becoming semi-professional for the NFL, basically. You got 180 semi-professional teams, and that's where we're at.
Yeah, and that's a little depressing on my part because I think it speaks to, and I'm not going to get like political here, but I think it speaks more to like our society as a whole right now. It does feel like we're becoming a little bit more commercialized and a little bit blander, and something you see when people. I'm not chicken littling like the sky is falling, but one of the telltale signs of like a falling empire per se is like culture starts to kind of erode away. And we see that with our music and our television. It becomes bland and like. For better or worse, football is ingrained in American culture, and college football is such a big part of that. And what I don't want to see us do is lose a lot of the flavors that college football brings, some of the rivalries, the differences between the SEC and the Big Ten and the play style of the Pac-12, and like those are what made college football so fun. And we've lost some of that with like the backyard brawl between Pitt and West Virginia. It was an awesome rivalry. That's gonna. We lost that, and it does remove something. We're going to lose Bedlam most likely. Like new rivalries will be born. I think that the football will be fine, college football, but I feel like we're toting a very thin line right now.
Absolutely. Once the floodgates are broken, we can't fix them. Here's the thing: we have this entity. It is called the NCAA, and the NCAA picks and chooses when it wants to bitch about things. And I think two things happen here. One, the NCAA always runs to Congress when something bad happens, and then Congress or the Supreme Court rules against them because nobody likes the NCAA, and they make terrible arguments. But two, I don't understand how the NCAA ever let TV deals be negotiated without them in the room. That was the biggest mistake they could have ever made, because now you have no power to step in and say, hey, Big Ten, leave Oregon, USC, UCLA, and Washington alone. Your money is here, right?
Yeah.
And so you have this, the NCAA could have stepped in and said, hey, conference realignments have to happen along this set. If you're in this conference, it has to happen along this longitude and this latitude, right?
Yep.
And that allows you to move within, right, your region, but you're not going all the way to the Midwest or East Coast for this stuff. So like you said, cutting down, I think basketball will be fine, right? You will find your travel buddy, right? Michigan and Michigan State will probably travel together when they're playing basketball on the West Coast, right? And UCLA and USC will probably travel together when they come to the Midwest, right? Or the East Coast.
Yeah. So
I think basketball will be fine. Hockey will probably be fine too, but you're right. Those other sports, there is no like, will this happen? We already know that. We already know that schools are cutting.
Yeah, Olympic sports are screwed. Track and field,
Yeah.
like I don't know how that's gonna work. Like things like that are screwed. It is like the NCAA has screwed the pooch so badly on so many things. And I also want to just take a moment to pause. This is not the fault of kids getting paid or any of those other nonsense. Like there is specific things that should have always happened. The name, image, likeness should have been a part when this became $1 billion sport and the way it was trending. Like it was ridiculous. I don't think we've ever seen the Supreme Court, all the justices agree on the same thing. And they all were like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, they get to make, yeah, like you guys are idiots. How have you gotten away with this for so long? So like, that's not the problem. You know, changing the BCS format is not the problem. Like we should have always had an expanded sort of playoff. So like there is good change and there's bad change. I think no matter what, I'm always going to watch college football. No matter what, we're always going to watch it. I do fear a little bit that we're going to become a little blander, you know, as we continue to go through this, because I did like the play style differences and how they all matched up. Like that was fun. And the cultures around college football are fun and unique and different. And that is because, let's be honest, the product on the field is not anywhere close to the NFL. So like
but I think to your point, we are going to move to a more homogenous style of play in college. And I'm with you. That loses the charm. Like part of the reason I watch college football, and I know it's not the reason everybody does, but part of the reason that I watch college football is because crazy things happen that you will never see in an NFL game. And if you do see it in an NFL game, somebody gets fired.
And the best part too about college is like the styles eventually migrate to the NFL. Like the NFL looks a lot more like the college game from a scheme standpoint, because you saw these kind of like the Pac-12 trying, you know, spread offense going up against like the I formation of the Big Ten, or like things like the contrasting styles and what was working and not working. So it's been a really good feeder ground for that. So yeah, I'm not chicken littling it right yet. it does suck. I love the Pac-12. I think anybody who's been a long-time listener knows I love watching the Pac-12 football. Even though I have no dog in the fight, I've found a very good time betting it. But they shot themselves in the foot repeatedly when they were stuck their nose up against having Texas and Oklahoma come in. That I was like, oh, you guys deserve to die as a conference. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I do find it crazy that Stanford can't find a home. That is, to me, insane right now.
Yeah, Stanford not being able to find a home feels like people, like conferences are like, well, are there better schools for us to get than Stanford? Stanford is also like a weird academic school. So that's another thing. Like,
it's just crazy because they're a school that outside of football and basketball have a lot of winning programs, and they just cannot find a home for anything. And that's because football and basketball rule the roost. Yeah.
Also, too, like, Stanford seems to be like going anywhere. I know, like, part of the reason some of the pushback for Oregon and Washington was like academics, but then everybody always points to Nebraska, who is shit at academics. Yeah. So it kind of like falls apart. I do think, I know we're not going to do like a, Big Ten and then like Big Ten B-side or anything like that. But I do think if there's a school that's going to leave the Big Ten soon, it'll be Nebraska, and it won't be Nebraska's choice.
Yeah, we'll see. They are. We're going to talk about them when we get to the Big Ten. They don't have a lot of runway right now, but they do have a guy in Matt Rule who is a certified program builder. But we'll get to that.
You were trying to get Frost fired for a long time.
Frost. What an idiot. I mean, if he had spent as much time at the facility as out on the streets from the rumors, then maybe they would have had a more winning program, but that's neither here nor there.
He was a Nebraska guy.
I know. Just absolutely ruined his legacy there. Let's talk a little football. Let's start with the Pac-12. We were already there. What's funny about this whole realignment, too, is I think that the Big 12 definitely survived by numbers. Like, they were like, we got to go get numbers. We survived. But, like, this is not going to be a good season for the Big 12, where the Pac-12 football schedule, I think there's a lot of really good teams. And I think we just start with the cream of the crop. USC, they're the prevailing favorites. They've got Caleb Williams coming back, who right now is being penciled in as the number 1 pick in the draft next year, in a very talented draft class. They are being kind of put in the realm of this team is a playoff contending team. Does USC kind of keep the dogs at bay and win this division and make the playoff run that everybody's talking about, or is it kind of the same old thing for USC? Is the fact that the Pac-12 is sort of got a lot of really good teams toward the top going to be too much for them to overcome this season?
The Pac-12, USC can't do it, and it's because they're not returning the same product. That they're returning Caleb, and they're returning one receiver, but the rest of it is not a new team, but a team that is untested. I think that this is a same old for USC, where they will be in position to win the Pac-12, or they will be in position to make the college football playoffs, but one or two things are going to happen. Either they lose a game going up to the Pac-12 championship, and so they won't be in the Pac-12 championship, or they do win the Pac-12, but they lost 2 games, and now they'll be a Pac-12 winner, but won't be in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, and they've got an interesting schedule. It's nothing too crazy. They have a little bit of a runway to start. They're playing San Jose State in week 0. Then they got Nevada, Stanford, Arizona State, who's behind the 8 ball, Colorado, which is going to be a disaster, I think, Arizona, before they play Notre Dame, then a Utah, then they get Cal, Washington, Oregon, UCLA.
This is literally what I'm saying. Like, okay, so your first half is cupcake, basically.
Yep.
And then you run into a gauntlet.
Well, it's the proverbial snake that eats itself, which is always the Pac-12. I have some concerns offensively just around the offensive line and whether that's going to gel, because I think Caleb Williams is a baller. I think Lincoln Riley is good enough and recruited well enough that they'll kind of figure out offensively. Defensively, it will be interesting. I have been, anybody who's listened to this podcast knows I am an Alex Grinch defender. because I always preface it towards expectation. I think a lot of people at Oklahoma do not appreciate my defending of him. But the numbers speak for themselves. You know, he's always improved defenses. I think this year is going to be his hardest task yet. I mean, when you look, he went to Wazoo. When he got to Wazoo, they were the 99th defense. He got them the top 30. You know, at OSU, he steps in, keeps them as a top 20 defense. Then he gets called down to Oklahoma. When he gets there, they're 84th defense. In 2 seasons, he has them at a top 5 adjusted defense. So, or top 15 adjusted defense. So, like, the dude's always gotten better, but this secondary is trash. The front 7 will be nice, but they are going to need the defense to step up because the offenses in the Pac-12 this year, while the defenses may not be very good across the board, the offenses are fantastic, I think. So with that said, who, I guess, do you pinpoint as maybe somebody that can push them or is sort of right there next to them? Is it an Oregon or Oregon State, a Utah, Washington? Where does your kind of compass point?
For me, and I know we kind of hinted at this before we started recording it. It's the Beavers, right?
I love it. It's so funny. Before the podcast, to give you a little pull behind the curtain, Dante and I haven't talked. Like we've texted a few, but we haven't really talked about football in a while. And we both came in and we were like, "Man, I can't wait to get your opinion on Oregon State because I think I got a bet to pull the trigger on here. But let's talk it out and see how it goes." It perfectly lining up on this. Well, we'll see if we're on the same side. We haven't talked about what bet we're making, but I think we're on the same side based on how you just teed that up.
Yeah, Oregon State last year had a phenomenal year, right?
Yep.
And they are one of those teams that they're bringing back like 70%, 80% of their team.
A lot of production returning.
Yes. I will say, like, the QB situation is a little, I don't know if they announced yet or if
they have. DJU is going to be starting.
Oh, so DJ, okay. And I think that plays out for them. I think Clemson probably wasn't the best place for him.
100% agree with that.
That Oregon State is ready. They're on the cusp. And they stole games last year, and when you look at it, they didn't really steal those games. They outplayed their opponents. They got underestimated, and I think people are going to underestimate them again. I think Oregon State will win the Pac-12.
Oregon State's out there. I don't know if I'm ready to pull the trigger just yet on that. I want to see how they play, but I am very high on Oregon State. They returned 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line, which was a very good offensive line, especially in the run game. I mean, these dudes are some maulers up front, and they are a run-first team, which is going to be nice as, you know, DJ gets kind of used to the system. But the one thing they've already said is they're going to be more kind of multiple on offense. They're not going to have DJ lining up in shotgun like 80% of the time, like Clemson did. Like, they're going to put him behind center a lot more. The wide receivers are going to run a little bit more of a route tree difference than what Clemson has. Like, we're going to talk about Clemson later. Everybody knows my thoughts on Dabo and that offense and what Tony Elliott did there, and it's just a train wreck. But I agree with you. I think DJ, his development's going to be a lot better. And Jonathan Smith, the head coach there, deserves a ton of credit because when he took over this program, it was dead in the water. And now things are looking very exciting for Oregon State. He's brought this program back. The defense lost a lot in the secondary, so that's a little bit concerning. But once again, I think the offense is going to be so good that the defense doesn't have to – they can regress a little from last year.
Yeah, I think that I'm not worried about their defense. Like the rest of the Pac-12 – we just talked about this. The Pac-12 isn't a stellar conference. And so I think if their defense regresses with this adding of DJ and changing up their offensive style, they should be able to score enough points to offset the defense. Now, I hope they don't get away from the run first because that's how they were killing teams.
I don't think they will. Yeah.
They were doing the thing that Michigan does. They were doing the thing that Georgia does. We load up that box and you try to stop us.
Yeah, and I think that is they don't have USC on their regular schedule. Right. And the schedule is pretty soft. I mean, Utah is going to, I think, be down this year. They present somewhat of a threat. Washington will present somewhat of a threat. They play Oregon, obviously, at the end of the season, but everything else is very winnable. I did lay a pretty sizable wager for myself on their over 8.5 wins.
Yeah, I did too. Also, we'll get to see like opponent, right? We'll get to see what they look like against San Jose State versus what Pac-12 looks or Pac-12, what USC looks like against San Jose State as well.
And I think if they can have a couple things break their way and they do see a USC team in Pac-12 championship. The thing that works for them is USC, while they have certainly upped their efforts on the defensive line, they bring in a guy like Bear Alexander and a couple other guys, it's still, I got to see what that defensive line looks like for USC, and that's the biggest problem. It's one of the benefits of moving to the Big Ten because they can't really get the defensive lineman guys to compete in the SEC, but they're going to have access to kind of the Midwest interior recruits, which will be huge for USC because they've got all the skill positions and quarterbacks covered in California, but that's always been a big issue for them recently.
They need some big corn-fed.
Yes, they need some beef down there, and with Oregon State's offensive line returning 4 of those 5 stars, like I said, their strength being run blocking, like they're going to maul you in the trenches. So that it's similar to like what you said with the Michigan, Ohio State kind of combating. Like Michigan is built to beat Ohio State. I think Oregon State is, if things can break their way, the defense can progress as the season goes on. DJ, continues to level up like we think he is. Yeah, they present a real threat, I think, in the Pac-12 this year.
Yeah, it's part of the problem too with Ohio State, where Ohio State is now built to beat your Alabamas and Georgias, but forgot that they still play in the Big Ten, and you have to beat your Michigans.
Yep, they're built to win national championships, and that's kind of where we're at.
Championship, right? And Michigan is currently exploiting that for.
We can't give away too much of the Big Ten preview, but that is there. I did mention Utah, thinking they are going to be a little bit down this year.
On Utah.
Yep.
I'm low on Utah.
And this is a team, keep in mind, that for the last 2 seasons on this podcast, we have bet them to win the Pac-12 championship. We were ahead of the ball on their development. They bring back Cam Rising, but they lose some key guys. He's working his way back from a big-time injury. I think the defense will be good as always. It's the offense that I'm finding hard ways to not see this as like a down year for Utah on this one.
Yeah, I also think there's like some political front office stuff happening at Utah too, especially with their move to the Big 12. So I think there's a lot happening behind the scenes at Utah that's going to affect their on the field play. And if you don't think that stuff doesn't affect on field play, you're crazy.
It absolutely does. Now they've got and on top of that, they got a brutal schedule.
Yes.
Now they haven't lost a home game with fans since 2018, so they got one of the best home field advantages. They're going to have the best defense in the Pac-12 again this year, but it's that offense that concerns me. It's not going to have the pop they need to get over the hill. Brant Kuthe's working back from another very serious injury. Tight ends are very important to this offense. They lose Kincaid to the draft. We'll see what Cam Rising looks like. I think it's going to be a little bit of a down year for Utah, which opens the door for teams like Washington and Oregon, I think, to step in as well and compete for the top tier. What do you got with those two teams?
2 of my Big Ten teams for next year. Washington just lost their running back.
Yep.
And I think for Penix, that is going to present a huge problem for him, because one thing that you had to do is I got to cover Penix running, and I have to cover this running back running, and I don't know who is going to do what. And now I only have to focus on Penix, that changes up my scheme for Washington. Oregon, on the other hand, I just want Oregon to put on paper the hype that they have in the preseason. Right? I want that to generate some results. We've seen Oregon the last 2 seasons, we've seen them get off to slow starts. Now, granted, they've started playing Georgia they've started playing, but you want to be mentioned in the same vein as these schools, you have to go out and beat those schools. I'm sorry. That's just how it is. Because though, like Georgia, would hang its hat on beating a highly touted Oregon team, right?
Yeah.
So I want them to match out. They have the personnel. And I don't want to do this, but is some of Oregon's problems too, like coaching, but also, are you going to be able to play away from home? We talked about this last year, right?
Yeah, Oregon's a wait and see team for me right now. I like Dan Lanningham. I think he's got the program sort of headed in the right direction, because it kind of got a little off the rails. But I still think they're lacking personnel defensively. I still don't know what the offensive line is going to look like. Bo Nix is entering his 50th year in college football, and while they lose their
from home,
and while they lose their offensive coordinator, who's headed down to Arizona State, it's interesting. It's Oregon's a wait and see team. Like, could they be really good and compete? Absolutely. But there's too many unknowns for me heading into the season. Washington's interesting because, the running back room, we got to see how that shakes out. But Penix gets his 3 top wide receivers back. So the offense, as long as the running backs can sort of maintain, that running back room can sort of maintain and maybe just, it'll be a slight downgrade. I think they have a chance to be as good offensively as they were last year because they're returning both tackles who are really good. The defense has got to step up and be better, but I think they have a shot, but it's a wait and see for Oregon on me.
Do you think, like last year they were number 1 in passing yards? Do you think that returns?
That's a good question. No, it probably regresses a little bit, but I don't think it's a huge drop off. Because, like I said, so much of the weapons return for Penix. The coaching is staying the same,
I'm just afraid that so like you said, we have to see how the running backs develop because we could, Davis is out, but we could see another star emerge, right? But if we don't, it makes them so one-dimensional.
Yeah, the other thing is their schedule isn't crazy on the defensive side of the ball. Like, they're going to have some opportunities.
No, I'm trying to think. So USC.
They got
Utah.
USC,
So
Oregon.
And Utah.
Yep, they play Utah. Like, Utah will be tough. Oregon, we're going to wait and see on the defense on that front.
They got to come to East Lansing.
They got to come to East Lansing. But they got Tulsa. They got Arizona, who's, they got a long way to go. They got Arizona State. They got Washington State, who's also got a long way to go. They got Stanford, California. Like, they're going to play Oregon State, which we both are very high on, but, I don't know how great that defense... Like, if that defense is top 50, I think that's a win for Oregon State. That's kind of where I'm at with them.
What was I about to say for the Huskies? I was going to say it's about Arizona. I know Arizona State jump ship. But the fact that Arizona is we're going to play football again this year. I honestly think Arizona is one of the schools that should put their football program on hold.
Arizona's they're headed in a tough... Arizona State's in a much better position than Arizona. Arizona State runs into the problem that once they get kids on campus, it's hard to keep them on the team because of all the other extracurriculars that can happen at Arizona State. I think Kenny Dillingham essentially said something to the effect of we can recruit them here. It's just keeping them focused is a different beast. And I do like Kenny Dillingham. I think that program, that's going to be a rough year, but I think that they're headed in the right direction. They've got a freshman starting this year. They're starting to build and get some good pieces in Arizona State, but they're much further ahead than Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona should be we just do basketball.
Yeah, it's true. Do we want to talk about Colorado? Their win total is set at 3.5 for a reason. Yeah. I do not have good feelings about this year.
So you got 59 transfers or something?
There's a lot. I've lost count.
Something ridiculous. We still don't. Coach Prime has said, about the quarterback situation that it is settled, but I don't know if that's true. And another thing, Coach Prime talks so much that I think that, especially since this is the last year for the Pac-12, that he has a target on him. Yeah. And that teams are going to be let's hang 100 on Colorado this year. Now, let me preface this with saying, I think Coach Prime was the right hire for Colorado. I think that in a few years, Coach Prime will have Colorado humming. It's not this year.
So that, I guess, leads me to my next question is, because I don't think they're going to find a lot of success on the football field. There's a reason. I think their win total opened at 5.5. It's now down to 3.5. There's a reason it's falling. It's hard to project this team because there are so many new places or new faces on this team. But I am super curious as to how this team handles failure because he's bringing a lot of guys over from the last program, which did a lot of winning, but in the most important game, they couldn't close it out, which 2 years back to back, they were the most talented team on the field, which raises, a yellow flag. I'm not going to say a full red flag, but it does raise the flag of, Deion is probably more of a salesman than a coach, and coaching still matters at the Power 5 level. You still got to be able to do both. But how this team handles failure has me very interested in how they build from that.
See, I feel like you hire a Coach Prime, and then you see how well he can perform in the CEO role of leading a football team, right? Great example of this, Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is not out there coaching. But
at this point, he used to be a hell of a coach, but at this point,
But at this point, he's not out there coaching. But you know what Jim does? He is able to identify these coordinators and this other personnel on staff. So Coach Prime is a personality, which means that he will be able to attract that type of talent to Colorado. Does he realize he can attract that type of, and is he willing to give up the race? Because I would be like, wait, I don't have to. Somebody else can call this offense. Somebody else can call this defense. And I still get the credit for it.
Yep,
absolutely. That's why I think this is also a culture shift for Colorado, right? And I don't know much about the University of Colorado, other than that's where my coach came from before he started coaching at MSU. But this is a culture shift. So how is the University of Colorado also going to handle Coach Prime and his antics as we move forward? That's also a huge question. I still think at the end of the day, this turns out positive for Boulder.
I think no matter what, they're in a better spot than they were last year, or where the program was heading. I mean, just from ticket sales and social media and recruiting. But Deion is going to be able to sell for sure, I think. But if you're losing a lot, it becomes harder to sell that vision. Yeah. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with Travis Hunter, because he is a guy, rumors are, and you can kind of see it in his development physically, isn't spending a ton of time in the weight room, I got to imagine, because he doesn't feel like he's put on a lot of muscle, and to play both ways at the Power 5 is going to be interesting. I think because Deion is going to be
sustainable.
Yeah, Deion's going to be in a lot of recruiting battles, and my fear is if they can't perform, people are going to point to Travis Hunter, was a top tier recruit, who's kind of following him around and be like, look, he can't develop this kid's career. So I think a lot hinges on that. I think his son's going to play great at quarterback. I think it will be a bit of a rocky start. I don't have a ton of concern there. I do think he can ball. I think the adjustment will be a little different, but yeah, I don't have high hopes for this Colorado team this year. I'm going to be very interested to see how they handle this year. I think long term, though, it's going to be fine. It's just, and thank God it's not a hotbed. Like, this isn't a university like Florida or something where you got to win right away. Like, they're going to have runway. I'm just very interested to see how they handle this, because I do not have good feelings about Colorado this season, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, the problem with Travis Hunter, right, because he's going to play wide receiver and cornerback.
Yep.
If he's hurt, that's 2 skill positions gone.
Yep. And they're leaning on him a lot to produce. And yeah.
I think it's unsustainable. I think he maybe plays on both sides. I hope that he maybe plays on both sides of the ball for 2 games or something like that, and then decide. Because the other thing, like you're pointing out, is like not only his development, but if he gets hurt, like you could be ruining his chances to play on Sunday.
Yeah, I have concerns, and I could be wrong. I'm not in the program. I'm kind of going based off of what I've heard, because I've done a lot of research on the team, listened to a lot of things, read a lot of things. You just look at him physically. He hasn't put on a ton, so it sort of points to maybe not being the best in the weight room, and you've got to really prep your body if you're going to go both ways. Like that's a lot on a kid to go both ways at Power 5, and so we'll see. I could be way wrong, but I do have some concerns there.
Yeah.
I think he's a very good kid. Also,
Colorado won one game?
Oh yeah, year? That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I'm simply putting it in. I'm very interested to see how this program handles, or how Deion handles failure, because he has yet to really reach that, and just see how this whole thing goes and test it. But I think long term it's gonna be fine, because Deion is Deion. He's a phenomenal seller. I think he'll play the executive roles. He's made some moves on the coaching staff that I like and I think are good. It's just, what does this look like? Big Ten time.
Before we leave, do we want to give out? Do you want me to give out my Pac-12?
Oh yes, yeah.
So I took exactly what you said, the over for Oregon State.
Yes, sir.
Of half games. I think Oregon State has more of that in them. Now, the intriguing one that I have is I took Stanford under 2.5. We didn't talk much about Stanford, but it is a dumpster fire over there. They're trying to find a conference. I don't know much about their personnel, but I saw 2.5 and I was like, man. And I looked at their schedule and I was like, man, maybe. Do they win 3 games? I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And then the one you and I aren't on the same page about, but I did take at plus 1,200 Oregon State to win the Pac-12.
I don't think it's terrible. I just, I'm so much wait and see on Oregon that I haven't pulled the trigger, but I don't hate the bet because, like, if Oregon State, we both are in agreement. I think 8.5, great bet. Bet the over on that. That's my bet of the podcast. Is my best bet I'm giving. If they progress like we think they're going to, they're going to be right there. And at that point, you could hedge if you wanted to. Like if Oregon and USC start like where you're like, holy hell, they're in a class of their own, which I don't think is going to happen. But like if somehow that happens, at that point you could hedge because I do think Oregon State's going to be in the race.
Yeah, I literally just like did the math. I was like, well, if I'm taking the bet that Oregon is going to be 8.5, and I'm looking at the field of the Pac-12. If they're over 8.5, they should be right there in the Pac-12 championship too.
Yep, I don't hate it at all. Alrighty, let's talk about the Big Ten. Your conference, yes. We're going to lean on you here pretty heavily. Do we want to count, because I figured we would talk Notre Dame, do we want to put them in the ACC or the Big Ten? Because I think...
Let's put them in the ACC.
That makes sense. I do think that they are going to be in the Big Ten here relatively shortly. I think
they're holding out.
I know, but as these conferences get bigger and bigger, I think at some point they're going to be forced because so much of their schedule relies on teams scheduling them as they're out of conference. I don't feel like people are talking about this enough. Like it requires USC to be like, you know what our out of conference game is going to be? Notre Dame. Like, and as Notre Dame gets better, it's not going to be worth these big programs to schedule them. Clemson to schedule them out of conference as they have tougher and tougher in conference games.
Yeah, so how do we want to do this? Do we want to talk about the top of the Big Ten? Do we want to talk about the bottom of the Big Ten? Like, what do we want to do?
Let's
want to talk about the big 3 and then the little whatever.
Let's start at the cream of the crop. The winners last year, Michigan. Michigan's coming in this year, and I guess my question for you is this just wash and repeat the same team we saw last year, or do they have an edge to them that takes them to that next level? Because I've got a feeling on this, but I would like to hear your opinion.
No, I don't think they have an edge on them that takes them to the next level. And this is not me being a Michigan hater. It's that what worked, what happened last year worked. So why are we fixing? We just need to move a few pieces if we're the University of Michigan. We don't need to make a dramatic change because we've proven ourselves. Now, did we get a little bit embarrassed when we were on the world stage? Sure, but we won't let that happen again, at least not as a Michigan man, right? We're not going to get embarrassed twice.
Definitely no sarcasm there.
Right? No, but if I'm being honest with you, like if I'm being 100% honest with you, Michigan is ranked number 2. I think that's exactly right for Michigan. I think Michigan has a shot at winning a championship this year. This pains me to say. Like, I don't want to say any of this. But I just think that you have a 2-headed monster in the backfield. That how many teams are going to have any answer for Quorum, right? And if you do, then we just bring out our next big NFL back, right?
Yep.
You know, you got a solid quarterback, not a great quarterback, but a solid quarterback who realizes when he needs to, let me hand this ball off to Quorum and get out of here. And I think this is the first time where the hype train for the University of Michigan and the talent on the field actually matches up, and I hate it.
See, I think it's virtually the exact same team as last year. And for me, that means they're not winning a national championship because I look at 2 things that they need to change or need to improve for them to win a national championship. Their wide receiver core and their quarterback play. They were 82nd in the country at 10-plus yard passing plays. I don't think that wide receiver room got better. I don't see guys like when we talk about teams that win national championships, the Alabamas, the Georgia, Ohio States, when Clemson was doing it, they always had kind of a wide receiver room that could push you. I don't think Michigan has that, and I don't really know if JJ's going to take that next step up. Now, what I do know is that offensive line is it's the same. It's just as good. The running back room is ridiculous. Almost every team in the country would kill to have that running back room. The defense is going to be virtually the same, maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse, but it's not going to be like a huge drop-off or a huge raise. And so they're designed the exact same. And so if their wide receiver room can't step up, and maybe they do, maybe they make that leap, but I don't see those guys. Like when I look at that roster, it doesn't jump off the page to me, and I don't know that JJ is going to make this huge jump. And so if it's the exact same season, beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, lose in the first round, what does that mean for Jim Harbaugh in this program? Are they okay with that? Is it the same thing, move on and keep on going? Or do they go, you know what?
Jim Harbaugh was brought there to beat Ohio State.
I don't disagree.
He beat Ohio State? Okay, then we don't care about anything else.
I do not disagree, but as a Michigan State fan, I know you're a little bit more you're on the pulse a little bit more. So I wanted to make sure that felt right. But I agree. I think that's ultimately the goal. It's not the Ryan Day situation. Ohio State's got a whole different situation. This is a big year for them coming up. But I agree. I think we said it earlier. Michigan is built to beat Ohio State and win Big Ten championships, not so much national championships, at least right now in the way they're configured. Maybe that changes, but it's wash and repeat. Same team as last year. They don't take that next step up in the wide receiver room. They don't take that next step up in the quarterback room. It's virtually the same and flat, and that just means I think it's going to probably be the same outcome, unless Ohio State can step up and take the reins. Do you believe where Ohio State is coming into this season that they are a clear-cut 1A, 1B, going to be in there for the national championship, going to be in there for the Big 12, or do they take a step back in what feels like a make-or-break year for Day, which is kind of crazy given his winning success there, but that's sort of where the standard's at.
You cannot lose to the University of Michigan as a coach of the Ohio University, full stop. With that said, C.J. Stroud, number 2 overall pick. Who is Ohio State's quarterback?
You're reading my mind. This is my big concern. For a little while now, you went from Justin Fields to C.J. Stroud. You had 2 clear-cut guys. I mean, C.J. Stroud last year, when the pocket was clean, he was the most accurate, deadly quarterback in college football. Like, all the metrics show it. In a clean pocket, that's where he's at. You've got a quarterback battle that's still going on. Now, granted, these are highly recruited guys. A guy who's been in the program for 3 years and then a newcomer here, but nobody's really taken the reins. They're not better than C.J. Stroud, and you've got an offensive line that, to be quite honest, kind of scares me. You're replacing both tackles, who last year combined for only 19 pressures total, and you're replacing a center who was drafted. You're bringing back your 2 guards, but they're not true pass blockers, and we saw what that Michigan State defensive line does. So, we know the skill positions are great. Wide receiver room, elite. Running back room has talent coming out the ears. But,
Marvin Harrison Jr., phenomenal. Can your quarterbacks and your offensive line hold up to get Marvin Harrison Jr. the ball?
Yeah. And I mean, you got... It's interesting that the battle at quarterback is still going on for me because you've got Kyle McCord, who's been in the program for 3 years. He's a highly recruited guy. If he can't overtake right now, which he didn't look great in the spring game, if I'm being honest, if he can't overtake Devin Brown right now, who had a banged up thumb earlier, who's 18 years old, you're telling me you got a lot of confidence in starting either one of those guys? With an offensive line that we're waiting and seeing on how they play, but we've known that offensive line is, even though how great I just listed them from last year, they still kind of got bullied when it came to Michigan. And there's another team here we're about to talk about in Penn State that may or may not be getting ready to make that next jump. It lends the question then, can Jim Knowles, who I'm a huge fan of, can the defense help if that offense struggles a little bit to find itself? Now, the good news, too, is Ohio State's schedule is not like it lends itself to a little opportunity here. I mean, you play Indiana, then Youngstown State, and then Western Kentucky before you got to go play Notre Dame.
Okay.
So there is some wiggle room here to kind of get it right early. But does this defense take a next step up to maybe help offset any offensive struggles? Because once again, they're going to have talent at the wide receiver and running back room. So if they can be average on the offensive line or a little bit above average, and the quarterback play can be decent, does the defense help cover some of this up?
Ohio State hasn't been a defensive monster under Ryan Day. They've been decent on defense. Don't get me wrong. They've had good defenses, but they're not like look at Michigan ran the ball down their throat and they had no answer. And then when they did switch to stacking the box to stop the run, then JJ just picked them apart because their secondary wasn't that great at OSU. So I don't think so. I think if they take too much of a backward step in offense, that this year spells disaster for the Buckeyes. Now, I'm saying that I don't think that that's true. I think that this conference is down to 3 teams, and I think this conference is down to Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, and I think everybody else, Maryland, maybe we could talk about that. But I think everybody else just has to figure out what to do with the wins that they can get, because playing any of those 3 teams is probably an automatic loss on your schedule in the Big Ten.
I think that's a very good point to bring up when we're talking about these teams, because I think you can walk away sometimes from this podcast being like, holy hell, they're down on this team that is just winning games. And that's not, we're talking about what they are compared to market expectations. Mm-hmm. What the betting market, which is the most efficient market in the world, has basically set their standard at. And so when we talk about these teams, it's whether or not they can exceed those win totals. Can they go win the national championship because they're up there in the box? That's what we're talking about. Ohio State's a really great team. It's just, where are they compared to the top of the top? It does scare me. I do like.
And look at this too. Like, even the down Ohio State last year, right? Still took Georgia to the edge, right?
You don't have an injury to Harris, and you don't miss that field goal. We could be looking at them as the national champion.
Exactly.
Like, they're probably the national championship, even with an injury to your best wide receiver, your 2 best wide receivers, and a missed field goal.
Yeah. And this is what we kind of talked about, I alluded to a little earlier, that Ohio State is built to win championships. Yep. Ohio State is not built to beat the University of Michigan, and that's where the problem lies.
Yeah. Now, I will be watching intensely because I'm a big Jim Knowles believer. I saw what he did at Oklahoma State and the drop-off immediately that happened there when he left. He's in year 2 now as the defensive coordinator. And this doesn't speak well because they blew it from a defensive standpoint in the last 2 games, but there has been intention to go out into the portal and get guys, to recruit a certain type of guy. The defensive line, I think, is going to be the key to watch them in this first couple games, because I do think there has been kind of a softness to this defense, and last year that started to change a little bit. I want to see if they take that next step up. I want to see if Jim Knowles can get these guys into a different mentality this year and really kind of fight for reps. I think they take a step up. It's just how much of a step they can take. So I'm holding my breath on them. The team that I'm very interested to talk about, because I spent a lot of time going on with this team. I watched their spring game twice because there's one part that I could not believe, and it does make me a little bit nervous, but also very excited because it's just like, is one unit just insanely good and the other one's just average, or is one really bad and average? But I'm going to kind of go from there. Is Penn State over-unders at 9.5. We have talked about this university and this program not in the best of like the last couple years. I have not been a big James Franklin fan at times, but is this the year where there's a lot of teams where we're kind of holding our breath and seeing that Penn State breaks through and has that year?
It depends if you believe in Drew and Singleton, and can they work together to cover up, can their talent cover up James Franklin's inability to coach in hard situations?
Yep.
That's where Singleton is arguably one of the best running backs, or should be one of the best running backs in not only the Big Ten but in the country. I know Ayler, like I know we don't really know what it's going to look like for him, but he should, everything on paper, right? He should be one of the most natural quarterbacks. Like the game should come easy to him. If them two can put it together, I think that this is a perfect season for, not a perfect season in sense of like they'll be undefeated, but perfect season for Penn State to take that next step, to be like we're mentioning them in the conversation with Ohio State and Michigan, but to actually solidify themselves in that position. With that said, just a little tangent. There was a report that came out either yesterday or earlier today that said that Penn State players have the worst academics in the Big Ten. So,
God help us. Of course they do. Yeah, I am very excited for this team. I think you hit it perfectly with like where Drew Aller in this. He was inconsistent in the spring game. Now, the spring game is not a complete picture, obviously. The offensive line scares me based on what I saw in the spring game because, and we're going to talk about the defense here. I'm very excited for this defensive line. I think the defensive ends are phenomenal. The thing that scared me, though, is like the backup ends, which I think are going to be good. We're kicking some of the starters' butts on offense. Like they were still getting some great reps against the starting offensive line. Like the second-tier guys were still getting after it. And that's, to me, the linchpin, because you're right. You have arguably the best, if not one of the best backs in the country. You've got Drew, who at times made some throws where you go, holy shit, this kid is legit. And then he made some throws where you're like, what the hell was that? So, and once again, that's the spring game. A lot of development happens between now and then. This is the first time he's really like taking the reins of this team over from a Sean Clifford, who was a bit of a disaster. So like a lot of progress can be made from then to now. And so, I am betting on him being better and being the athlete that we think he can be. And there's a guy waiting in the wings that can step in if he gets hurt or isn't performing well that I think doesn't have that big of a drop-off. The offensive line has to step up because everywhere else, I think they're really solid, with the one exception of defensive tackle, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. But that's my biggest concern. On defense, Manny Diaz exceeded expectations. Like, Manny Diaz didn't have a great job at time as a head coach down in Miami. Some of it was his fault. Some of it was not his fault. The help, the boosters didn't step up as much as they are right now, but he also wasn't great. But what he can do is he can coach defense, and he gets great penetration. He creates a lot of chaos, and like he had this defense as a top 10 defense. I think they're going to be right there again this year. Defensive tackle, they felt a little bit small, so linebackers are really going to have to step up, which I think they can be. I think the secondary is going to take that next leap, which they can, and like he creates a lot of chaos. And so this team feels very good coming into this season.
Yeah, I'm upset that and I know we are part of the reason, and we as in Michigan State are part of the reason that Manny Diaz no longer has his job.
True.
But I am still upset that Michigan State did not go and grab him. And as far as improving defenses, he can take your personnel, like we're not even getting new personnel in here, and just coach them up. It is phenomenal, and I know he cannot wait to play Michigan State. So
last game of the schedule, November 24th.
I'm not that. I am more worried about James Franklin pissing the bed.
Yeah.
There's
a reason they've burned through offensive coordinators at Penn State, which is something we talked about in the past, and not being able to have continuity on the offensive side of the ball. From an offensive coordinating standpoint, it has been certainly a concern.
Yeah. So, again, Nick Singleton was Big Ten Freshman of the Year last year. Like, if him and Drew just have a little bit of chemistry, just a little bit, it is going to be.
And if the offensive line can create some separation and some holes, it can be potent for sure. I think the linchpin is that defensive line or that offensive line, and then interiorly, I mean, you're replacing PJ at defensive tackle, and that's going to be tough. But you've got two great ends in Isaac and Robinson, great depth behind him. Like I said in the spring game, the backups were jumping off the ball. It's just they feel small at defensive tackle. And so, but Manny Diaz loves to blitz, and it's going to require so that they don't get bully balled by a Michigan, because that's the thing. I think they're in a really great spot to potentially upset Ohio State here. So it's really, can they beat Michigan? And my concern there is simply the run game, and so it's going to rely on getting great pressure. Linebackers are really going to have to step up and tackle in open space and in the interior. But I think as long as Manny Diaz can continue to, I mean, they've got some time before they play Michigan. They play Michigan third to last game. He's got some time to prep and get these guys going. This is a very exciting team. At 9.5 is their over-under. Like they're going to be a fun team to bet week to week, especially in that Ohio State and Michigan game, I think, pending any injuries.
Yeah. So I guess we got to talk Iowa.
You want to start there? We can start there. Iowa.
I mean, they're right, if I'm right.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Or Wisconsin.
We can talk about Maryland. I think Maryland is also sort of right in the hype. Yeah, I think those two teams are probably a little bit better. But let's talk about Iowa because, I mean, those kids can't stop betting.
I was about to say, man, Iowa on paper should be good.
But should they?
Personnel?
I mean,
right.
they have the most nepotism incompetence the world has ever seen in an offensive coordinator. I mean, they had to literally write into the contract that they average more than 25 points a game.
So here's something, right? When looking at that, because I know people are like, well, that's just 3 touchdowns or whatever, or 4 touchdowns. It is hard to score a touchdown.
Yes, very much so.
Especially if you're Iowa, where you end games 13-7.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
Right. So, I don't know. Kinnick is still a hard place to play, right? So, the home field advantage that Iowa has is unmatched. I do think that Iowa is a bit of a dumpster fire, but their schedule is one that is always going to lend itself to be able to put themselves right there in the talk for a Big Ten championship, right? Because their crossover games are Penn State and Michigan State.
Can't get much better than that this year.
Yep, I don't know. After that, you play Wisconsin, but you're always going to play Wisconsin. That's a game that just to come up, and then you end it at Nebraska. And you can really take advantage of 2 new coaches there, right? So Iowa should be decent if their players stop gambling on their own games.
I literally on my pre-note sheet literally write Brian offensive coordinator equals dumb. That's my note. Just dumb. Cade McNamara comes in as the most Iowa quarterback ever, but it's an upgrade for them based off what they had last year. And I don't hate Cade as much as a lot of people do. I do. He's a gamer. He's an absolute gamer. He doesn't turn over the ball a ton. He knows where to go with it. I have other questions. We had flagged, when Greg Doyle left as their strength and conditioning coach, the effect that would have there. Let's see how this offense of line develops. It's been the strong suit for years. Where does that go? The defense was second in yards per game, second in points allowed, first in defensive touchdowns, 11th in third down conversion rate. That's always been a pretty solid. I don't expect them to have a big drop off because Phil Parker is a whiz kid on the defensive side of the ball. But Iowa benefits from the fact that there are still divisions, which the Big Ten is going divisionless, which we didn't even really talk about at the top, but sucks for programs like Northwestern, Iowa. These teams are never going to sniff a Big Ten championship again.
Does it suck?
It doesn't suck for us football fans. It sucks for these programs like Northwestern.
Even for those schools, even for a Northwestern, a Rutgers, I won't say Maryland because I think Maryland is improving their product year after year. Illinois in past years, although I think boosters at Illinois will get tired of not being Illinois from the 90s. So
yeah.
But My school makes $80 million a year, and we don't have to be good at football.
Yeah, but you have a better recruiting base and it's harder to recruit to Northwestern without the idea of like, yeah, you're going to get a shot to potentially play.
Northwestern just fired their whole coaching staff.
This is also very Northwestern's program is dead in the water. That is dead, and I am ready to declare that program dead in the water.
They're lucky they're not that the NCAA isn't coming and being like death penalty.
Yeah, they are. They are definitely lucky on that one.
Yeah. And I saw some people here because I'm in Chicago forever. They was like, I can't believe they fired. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't believe? They should have done that before they even confirmed that this stuff was happening.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot, to say the least. They're not a team we're going to spend a whole lot of time on covering, but yeah, that the field stuff was, that was a doozy, to say the least. Yeah, I think Iowa, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm more interested in programs like Maryland, Nebraska, Wisconsin, what we're going to start to do there, which I guess...
Yeah, let's talk about Luke Fickell.
I was going to say, that feels like a natural transition here, which Luke Fickell takes over the Wisconsin program. Last year, we were big proponents of, Paul Chris has probably got to go. Luke Fickell steps in, which I was like, hire Jim Leonard. They went with Luke Fickell. I have no problem with that. Luke Fickell did an immaculate job at UC. I mean, he took the University of Cincinnati to a playoff game. Like, just let that sink in, folks. One of the hottest coaching commodities out there. But things are going to start to look a little different in Wisconsin, I think. This team, while defensively things may not change as much, they're going to change up the scheme a little bit, but they're going to be about the same. The offense is going to look, I think, dramatically different. What are your thoughts on this Wisconsin team as they try to transition to something completely new? Because Luke Fickell has been pretty vocal about, I think a lot of people when USC and UCLA got signed were like, oh, this team's going to have to go play in Wisconsin and take a heavy run. But Luke Fickell seems to be able to approach, we got to adjust more to be like an Ohio State, a USC, less of what we've seen in the past from Wisconsin.
So you already know that I'm a little sour on Luke Fickell for him spurning us when he was supposed to come to MSU. But that's a little thing. Luke Fickell is being talked about as like Big Ten Coach of the Year. This is going to be a Frankenstein of an experiment, Frankenstein monster of an experiment here at Wisconsin, because what Luke Fickell wants to do, this run and gun, this high five, Wisconsin's personnel isn't set up for it. You got these big, slow backs, right? These big lines on both sides of the ball. And then you're going to try to trot out a quarterback out there who wants to do a spread offense and run and gun. Like, it's just not. I almost took a bet on Wisconsin I almost took the under on Wisconsin, but then I looked at their schedule and I was like, even if they look a halfway decent team out there,
they're playing some pretty bad football teams this year.
Yeah. But I just don't think it's going to. To be honest, I think for 2 years this isn't going to work. I think when Wisconsin goes up against better opponents, they're going to get blown out.
Yeah,
because it's going to take Luke Fickell 2 years to switch that out. The other thing is, just like we were talking about with Coach Prime, can you sell this new Wisconsin to the Wisconsin fans? Because for years they have been known as big, slow, grinded out football, and now we're going to change that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, everything, even their offensive blocking scheme is changing. They are changing what has been their bread and butter. I mean, when you think of Wisconsin, you think of an O-line, like Penn State is linebacker U. Ohio State and Alabama have turned into kind of wide receiver U. Wisconsin is O-lineman U. And I'm not saying that's necessarily going to change, because I think Luke Fickell understands the Midwest, the recruiting. He's already talked about how he's going to be battling in Ohio for against Ohio State. He understands that region. He's going to be picking off the Catholic leagues outside of Chicago. Like, he understands what wins. He even understands he got a first row seat to like the beef you need on the lines to compete against SEC teams and stuff. So they're changing the offensive line scheme, completely different blocking scheme this season. Like, everything is changing. And they haven't recruited for that change. So, they bring in some guys through the portal. They bring in the quarterback from SMU. Some things are going to change. Luke Fickell's a phenomenal coach. You saw immediate differences at UC the year he showed up. I'm based in Cincinnati, so I was able to see it sort of firsthand. But it's going to be an adjustment for sure. And I think if winning comes, the fan base will be okay with it. But it is a good point. But then again, I think the fan base is almost I think they're starving for it a little bit. I don't think they're starving for the insane dramatic changes that are going to happen, but I do think that being kind of stuck in a prehistoric time was also starting to piss them off a little.